So you know that there are two ways of writing programs. One is the procedure oriented way, and the second one is the object oriented way. So in object oriented programming, it consists of set of objects, right? And those objects communicate with one another if there is a necessity, and this is how object oriented programming works. So starting with the definition of an object. What is an object? So an object is any identifiable entity that has attributes and behavior. Okay, so any object will have three elements. One is identity, second is state, and the third is behavior. Okay, so talking about identity, okay, when a name is given to an object, that is known as identity. Let's say you have got two different dogs. So it may be that both the dogs will have very similar features, okay, very similar features such as same color, same breed, okay, but definitely they will have different names, isn't it? Although they may have the same attributes, and of course they will have the same behavior, yeah, but they will be distinguished with the help of their identity. Okay, for example, one dog is dog 1 and the second dog's name is dog 2. So that is the identity of the dog object. Dog 1 is your dog 1 object and dog 2 is your dog 2 object. Okay, so this is what is meant by identity. Now attributes are the features that an object can possess. Okay, for example, again, if we take the dog example, so dog, what are the attributes related to a dog? Color, breed, weight, name, all these different elements or features represents the attributes. Okay, and when you assign a value to these attributes, that becomes state. Okay, for example, if I say dog 1 is black in color, so we have assigned black value to which attribute? To color, dog's color attribute. Okay, and if I assign white color to the second dog, so that will be the attribute, that will be the state of the second dog. Okay, so remember, when you assign a value to an attribute, that becomes the state of the object. So far we have seen identity, we have seen state, okay, and we have seen how state and attributes are related. The third element related to an object is behavior. Every object will have some behavior. For example, a dog can bark, can run, can eat, can walk, can sleep. So these are some examples related to behavior of dog object. Okay, now let's talk about class. So what is a class? See, a class is a blueprint. Okay, a class is a blueprint. It is a specification. You may call it as a blueprint or a specification. Specification for what? For creating objects. Okay, so class is a logical construct. Okay, class is logical, and objects are created with the help of class. Okay, for example, if we talk about construction of a building, before the building is created, it is designed on paper, isn't it? The whole building is designed on a paper by an architect. So by creating the design, on paper, we do not create the actual building. Okay, so the blueprint of the building is logical. Okay, it does not exist physically, it exists logically. Okay, so same is the case with class and object. Once you create the class, it's a logical construct with the help of which we can create the object, the actual object. Okay, just like with the help of blueprint, you can create the actual building. So that is the difference between class and object. Let's talk about instance now. So instance is just another name for an object. Okay, instance is just another name for an object. Next point is superclass and subclass. So you know that we can create a new class from an existing class. So when you do this, the existing class is known as superclass, and the new class or the child class is known as subclass. Okay, so superclass and subclass is related with inheritance. Now let's talk about the different principles. Principles of object-oriented programming. Okay, any discussion about OOP is not complete without discussing the four principles. What are they? Abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. So what is abstraction? Abstraction means representing the essential features of an object without going into the details. For example, let's take the example of a car. You may know how to drive the car, but you don't necessarily need to know how the car is working, how the engine is working. Okay, so this is the meaning of abstraction. The features which are not that important for the user is hidden. Okay, whereas the interface is visible. Okay, so this is abstraction. You know that when you move the steering wheel towards the left, the car will go towards the left. You know that when you move the steering wheel towards the right, the car will go right. Okay, so you know how to use the car, but you don't know how the car is working. Okay, so this is known as abstraction. Okay, and since we are talking about abstraction, we might as well discuss multiple abstractions. Okay, what is multiple abstraction? Now there can be different levels of abstraction. For example, I, as a driver of the car, I know how to drive the car, but I don't know the working of the car. The inner working of the car is not known to me, and I don't need to know. Okay, this is one level of abstraction. Another level of abstraction is for a mechanic, let's say. Okay, a mechanic must know the inner working of the car, then only the mechanic can fix the car if there is some problem. Okay, so the mechanic will have access to the inner workings. Okay, so this is another level of abstraction. Okay, a mechanic's abstraction is different from driver's abstraction. Okay, so there are different levels of abstraction. So what is essential and what is not essential depends upon the user of the object. Okay, for the driver, the essential is just to know how to use the steering wheel along with the brake, clutch and accelerator, whereas for the mechanic, the essential things are how the engine is working, how the engine rotation results in the transmission of the wheels of the car, right? How the fuel is being injected into the engine. All these details need to be known by the mechanic. Okay, so the essential features will change according to the user. Okay, so this is what is meant by multiple abstraction. Okay, so we have discussed the first principle, abstraction. Let's discuss the second principle, that is encapsulation. Okay, so let's take the general example of encapsulation, and again I'll be using the car example. In the car example, you know that the engine is encapsulated, right? You cannot normally open the engine, isn't it? It's encapsulated in a container. Even if you open the bonnet of the car, you cannot see inside the engine. Okay, so the whole mechanism is encapsulated. Let's take another example. Let's take the human body. Okay, in the human body, you know that we have three. Let's take the example of three organs: the heart, lungs and kidneys. So any organ for that matter is encapsulated within the skin. Okay, we cannot see our inner workings. Okay, and it's not directly accessible. Okay, we don't know how the kidney works, how the lung works, but it runs automatically. Okay, this is encapsulation. Our whole system, our whole biological system is enclosed within the skin. Okay, and it's not visible and it's not accessible also. Okay, it is contained within the skin and it works automatically. Okay, this is the example of encapsulation. Now in terms of programming in Java, a class consists of two things. One is attributes, that is variables, and the second thing is behavior, the functions. Okay, so functions and variables are encapsulated within a class. Okay, this is known as encapsulation. So in other words, I can say data and the code which will modify the data is encapsulated within a class. Okay, data means it's represented through variables, and the code which will modify those variables are functions. Okay, so data and code is combined within a class, and this is encapsulation. Third principle is inheritance. Okay, so inheritance allows you to create a new class from an existing class. This is inheritance. What is the last principle? Polymorphism. Okay, so polymorphism, it is the ability of an object or a method to behave differently, okay, according to the message it receives. This is the meaning of polymorphism. Okay, it allows a method or an object to behave differently. So these were the 4 principles. We have seen multiple abstraction, we have seen object and instance, they are same things, and we have seen class is logical, object is physical. I've touched upon member, variables and methods. Okay, so inside the class you'll have 2 things. One is variables, okay, or in other words data. Data is represented or stored in those variables. Okay, they are also known as member variables. And you'll have functions. The second part is functions. So the functions have the ability to directly access those variables. Okay, so these functions are known as methods or member methods. Okay, now next we'll look at user defined data type. What is user defined data type? See, in Java you have primitive data types such as int, long, float, double, boolean, etc. All these are predefined data type. Okay, but if you want to create your own data type, okay, you can use the existing primitive types to create a new data type. In fact, when you create a class, you are actually creating a data type. Okay, for example, when you create an int type of variable, int x is equal to 10, let's say, you can store only one value in the x variable. You take any primitive type, okay, a variable will be able to store only a single value in case of primitive types. Okay, those variables which are created with the help of primitive types can store only single values. Okay, whereas take the case of, let's say, student. Okay, what kind of data is associated with student? So student name, student's age, address, parents name. Okay, so you can see there are so many data associated with student object. Now you cannot use any single primitive data type to store all these values, isn't it? So you can create a class. In the class you can create, let's say, a class, student class, and in that student class you can combine the different primitive types, the required different types, to create a student type of data. Okay, so this is what is meant by user defined data type. So again I'm repeating that class is a user defined data type. Okay, and object communication. Since in object oriented programming, our program is a collection of objects. A collection of objects make up our program. Okay, so the objects should be able to communicate with one another. Okay, by sending a message. Okay, this is known as communication of objects. And a class is also known as object factory, okay, because you with the help of class you can create multiple objects. With the help of a single class you can create multiple objects, okay. That is why class is known as object factory. Just like with the help of building blueprint you can create any number of buildings, okay. So we can say that the blueprint of the building is a building is a building factory. So I've touched all points in this chapter. I think I've forgotten to discuss about procedure oriented programming. Okay, so let's quickly have a look at procedure oriented programming versus object oriented programming. So in procedure oriented programming the focus is on data. The focus is on functions, okay. In procedure oriented programming you divide the main problem into many sub problems, okay, and those sub problems are represented through functions. So these functions, the focus in procedure oriented programming is on functions, not on data, okay. See, a program is what? It consists of two things. One is data, and the second thing is the functions which will operate upon those data. Okay. So in procedure oriented programming, the focus is on the functions. Okay. Whereas in object oriented programming, the focus is on data. Okay. So in object oriented programming, emphasis is given on data security, whereas in procedure oriented programming data is not that secure.